On February 19th, Houthi rebels fired surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, at a US F-16 fighter jet and an MQ-9 Reaper drone, marking a significant escalation in hostilities between the Iranian-backed militant group and the United States, according to 3 senior US defense officials speaking to Fox News. The jet was flying over the Red Sea, off the coast of Yemen, when it was targeted. Fortunately, the missile did not strike the aircraft. Later the same day, another SAM was fired at the American MQ-9 Reaper drone, operating outside Houthi-controlled areas over Yemen. This marks the first instance of the Houthis directly targeting a US F-16 fighter jet, a move seen as an alarming development in the ongoing conflict. The US military has been actively countering Houthi threats in the region, especially concerning their attacks on commercial vessels and military assets. Escalation in the Red Sea. The attacks come amid increasing tensions between the US and the Houthis, who have intensified their strikes since the October 7, 2023, Hamas-led attack on Israel. In response to Israeli military operations in Gaza, the Houthis launched a series of attacks on international shipping routes in the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandab Strait, prompting the US to increase its naval presence in the region. Under the Biden administration, the US military has actively engaged in defensive measures, escorting commercial vessels and responding to Houthi aggression. However, the latest missile launches represent a shift from targeting ships and drones to attempting to shoot down a manned US fighter jet, a move with potentially grave consequences. US military response and strategic debates. The ongoing Houthi attacks have triggered intense debates at the highest levels of the US military and government regarding the best strategy to counter the growing threat. Officials are weighing 2 primary options: a counterterrorism approach. This strategy would involve persistent strikes targeting key Houthi leaders and operatives responsible for planning and executing attacks. Such an approach would resemble past US counterterrorism efforts in the Middle East, but could be costly and resource-intensive, especially as military assets are being stretched thin due to other commitments, including border security operations. Defensive strategy. This approach focuses on continued strikes against Houthi infrastructure and weapons storage facilities, rather than targeting individuals. While this strategy limits direct engagement with Houthi leadership, it ensures that their military capabilities are continuously degraded. This strategic dilemma has been further complicated by the Trump administration's decision to relist the Houthis as a terrorist organization, a designation that impacts how the US government approaches military and diplomatic engagements with the group. Risk of direct confrontation. Senior US military leaders have expressed concerns that it may only be a matter of time before a Houthi missile successfully strikes a US Navy vessel. Such an event could lead to devastating casualties and significant damage to aircraft carriers and destroyers that have been patrolling the Red Sea since the Hamas attack on Israel. While the US Navy has so far successfully intercepted all Houthi-launched missiles and drones, these interceptions have sometimes occurred just moments before impact, highlighting the high-stakes nature of the conflict. The US has been engaging in near-continuous defensive operations in the Red Sea for the past 2 years, frequently firing high-cost SM-2 and SM-3 missiles to neutralize Houthi threats. The financial and logistical burden of these operations raises further questions about long-term US strategy in the region. Houthi capabilities and Iranian involvement. The Houthis, backed by Iran, have developed increasingly sophisticated missile and drone capabilities, Their ability to fire surface-to-air missiles at advanced US fighter jets and drones demonstrates a notable enhancement in their military arsenal. The group's growing capabilities have raised concerns that they could eventually deploy more advanced weaponry against American and allied forces. Iran's role in supplying and training the Houthis has been a subject of international scrutiny. US and allied intelligence assessments suggest that Iran has been instrumental in providing the Houthis with advanced weaponry, including drones and missiles, capable of reaching significant distances. This support has emboldened the Houthis and increased the complexity of US and allied operations in the region. International reactions and political implication has drawn strong reactions from international stakeholders. US allies, particularly those with vested interests in Red Sea trade routes, have voiced concerns over the impact of continued Houthi attacks on global shipping and economic stability. The ongoing attacks have already resulted in disruptions, with some shipping companies altering routes to avoid potential threats, leading to increased costs and delays in global supply chains. Domestically, the Biden administration is facing mounting pressure to adopt a more decisive approach to countering the Houthis. Critics argue that the administration's current response has been largely reactive and insufficient in deterring further aggression. Calls for direct action against the Houthi leadership have intensified, with some officials advocating for a more aggressive stance to eliminate key operatives behind the attacks. Potential scenarios moving forward. As the situation continues to evolve, several possible outcomes could shape the next phase of US military engagement in the region. Expanded US airstrikes. If the White House opts for a counterterrorism strategy, targeted airstrikes against Houthi leadership and operational centers could become more frequent. Increased naval presence. The US may deploy additional naval assets to strengthen deterrence and improve interception capabilities against Houthi threats, diplomatic efforts, and pressure on Iran. The US and its allies may ramp up diplomatic efforts to curb Iranian support for the Houthis, potentially through sanctions or regional negotiations. Potential ground operations. Though unlikely at this stage, a sustained escalation could eventually lead to calls for more direct intervention, including possible special operations missions against high-value Houthi targets. Conclusion. The Houthis' decision to target a US F-16 fighter jet and an MQ-9 Reaper drone with SAM missiles marks a dangerous new phase in the ongoing conflict. The situation in the Red Sea and surrounding areas remains volatile, with US military and political leaders facing tough choices on how best to respond to this growing threat. With tensions running high and the possibility of further escalations, the coming weeks and months will be critical in determining the trajectory of US involvement in the region, whether through increased military action, diplomatic maneuvers, or a combination of both. The Biden administration will need to carefully navigate this complex and evolving security challenge.